Hello and welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. On this episode, I interview Progressive Contractors Association of Canada President Paul De Jong and Canadian Labour Congress President Bea Bruske about the federal government's recent Clean Energy Tax Credit initiative and attached labour conditions, which are supported by the CLC and opposed by PCAC. We'll find out why in a moment. But first, here's the latest headlines from the Daily Commercial News and the Journal of Commerce. Richard Lyle, the president of the Residential Construction Council of Ontario, says the federal government's announcement that GST will be removed on construction of new rental apartment buildings is, quote, a positive step in the right direction, but we're a long way from being out of the woods. The urgency is picking up, but it needs to pick up even more, end quote. Ian Cunningham, president of the Council of Ontario Construction Associations, said in an email to the Daily Commercial News that, quote, the federal government's announced plan to eliminate GST on residential construction inputs is enthusiastically welcomed by the industry, unquote. The Royal Architectural Institute of Canada has announced it will commemorate the 2023 National Day for Truth and Reconciliation with a two-part webinar series during the week of September 25th to 29th. The open access webinar sessions were created in partnership with the RIAC's Indigenous education provider, Envision. Sessions are free and pre-registration is required, with the first session on September 26th and the next session the following day. The Association of Consulting Engineering Companies Ontario has announced the appointment of its 2023 and 2024 Board of Directors at its annual general meeting held recently. The 2023 and 2024 chair of the board is Don Holland, an executive with GHD. Holland has contributed to ACEC Ontario for 10 years. In the West, the British Columbia Institute of Technology has announced $33 million in private funding has been raised for its new Trades and Technology Complex on its Burnaby, BC campus. Over 45 organizations and individuals contributed towards construction of the $220 million project as part of the BCIT Inspire campaign, the largest fundraising campaign in the institution's history. And the Alberta government is investing $7 million through the Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction Fund to assist a Cenovus energy study looking at how small modular nuclear reactors can be used in northern Alberta oil sands operations. While there are no projects currently being planned, the study is intended to frame discussion around future possibilities. And that's it for the headlines. First up, we have Paul De Jong, and following that interview, we'll hear from Bea Bruske. Enjoy. I'd like to begin with, you've said that this will sort of put a chill on investment. Maybe you could expand on that and what you mean by why that would put a chill on investment and then concurrently not developing clean energy projects.
Yeah, so to kind of begin at the beginning, the federal government some time ago announced this suite of incentives for the clean energy sector. It's actually plural sectors. There's an electricity component and carbon sequestration, hydrogen, et cetera. So there's a number of different packages differing in amounts of credits, tax credits that the government is offering to project proponents who will undertake projects in this area. And in that respect, PCA actually supports that endeavor. We observe, all of us, that the American administration have released a gigantic stimulus package called the Inflation Reduction Act, which is placing tremendous amounts of money in this sort of clean energy infrastructure sector. And so it's not inappropriate for the Canadian government to respond in some proportionate manner. Our concern is not with the tax credit itself, but the manner of its application. There is a component which is called a labor conditions clause, which says that a proponent will only get 10% of the tax credit of the overall package if it ties the wage rates of the skilled workforce to a prevailing rate.
Right.
And that's our concern, is that the government is kind of inserting its hand into what is normally a free and competitive marketplace, where contractors are bidding against each other, unions plural or even non-union, are seeking the support of workers in terms of bargaining on their behalf. And that has actually worked quite well in Canada. Our market is vibrant for construction. It is certainly, a market that is growing. But the concern that we have is that if the government institutes the sort of one wage rules them all approach, you begin to send a signal to the investors that there is no ability to be flexible, to be innovative, and that the pricing level may be too high for them to greenlight their investment.
Now, let's drill down to Alberta. That's, the biggest energy producing sector there is, and presumably there's a lot of activity on how to make it clean as well. So how would this affect that?
Well, Alberta, like the other provinces, and perhaps even more so here, have many opportunities that are emerging but not yet finalized. You have the wind and the solar industries. You have carbon sequestration, which is one of the priorities of the federal and provincial government. You have the rising tide of a variety of different hydrogen projects. And all of these projects arguably can fall under this tax credit arrangement. And so our observation is that you have a number of project owners and investors who are contemplating these projects and now observing that their labor costs may demonstrably increase. And as many people know in the industry, on a large industrial project, the overall cost of labor on a large project is usually around 35 to 40%. And so if that already high cost of labor further increases because of an artificial prevailing wages and benefits actually, that's causes a big concern, because now the affordability of the project, or projects plural, come into question.
And how far along is this? Is it mandatory, or is it like proposed? What are your options, and what are the government's options as far as?
Yeah, we've been quite careful because it's not law yet. We understand that the federal bureaucrats are now obliged by their political masters to create regulations, draft regulations. And that this fall, during the legislative sitting, the government would seek to implement this. However, we know, or at least we believe, that those changes will be retroactive. And so we think that the government is already commencing with these provisions already, even before the legislative session has begun.
Now, I would assume you have some sort of some interfaces with the energy sector and other, business members of the community. What's their overall opinion? Not to, put words in anybody's mouth, but what's the overall impression you get of what they think about, specifically Alberta, but generally speaking?
Yeah, I can't speak on their behalf, but the impression that I have is that there's a kind of it's kind of a bittersweet or a kind of a degree of anticipation and eagerness, because these tax credits are genuine and real and a bit of a game changer, frankly, in terms of how a proponent might invest in a project. So that's what we think is good. And so we, with the industry folks, have some degree of optimism. But then that optimism is severely kind of dampened by the idea that much or most or all of the tax credits that would be granted might be erased or severely mitigated by the increase in the cost of labor. And I'll make one point here. The concern that we have is absolutely not with the skilled trade workers getting paid well. Our observation and our experience is that skilled trade workers across Canada are already commanding excellent wages and benefits. It's a labor market where there are not enough workers for the positions available, and that always bodes well for the workers, and that's to their credit. They have a right to be paid and remunerated well, and they are. And so our concern is not with what the workers are making. It's with the inflexibility and the sort of the artificial raising of that sort of threshold of wage and benefit to a level that really seems to be drawn out of the abstract.
Now, you mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Act. I get confused, sorry. But you mentioned that act in the States, and they have a similar system from the sounds of things. Is it just a matter of how big America is compared to us that they can adapt this, and it doesn't seem to, or is there a blowback of the same sort in the States?
Yeah, I use the word prevailing wage, which is drawn from the federal bureaucrats' language. In America, the reference that they make is to what's called a fair wage, and they're really the same thing, where both governments have decided, we think erroneously, to kind of tie wage rates to an artificial indicator. In America, however, and I don't pretend to know everything about the American program,
no, me neither.
The IRA program, But we do understand that there's a lot more flexibility that contractors and proponents of projects can utilize when they're faced with this situation of, on the one hand, winning significant incentive opportunities, and on the other hand, having those potentially, watered down or mitigated by inflationary high wage and benefit rates. In America, there seems to be more kind of relief valves in the system to take away the pressure that proponents might have that otherwise might cause them to cancel their investment. Whereas here in Canada, again, subject to the final legislation, our discussions with the bureaucrats have been quite frustrating. We don't presume the final outcome of this legislation because it hasn't been tabled yet. But so far, we don't see the same kind of flexibility here in Canada that has been observed in the United States.
And I guess finally, I'd ask, we're talking about institutional investors. Do you see this as them going, well, why don't I just go and invest in the States? Like, given those two that's
the big question, right? Because I in the course of my work, I frequently have formal and informal conversations with these investors. These corporations that are typically international in scope, and they have a whole sort of a suite of options. They can build their projects here in Alberta, in the Wood Buffalo, or in the Heartland. They can build their projects in the Gulf Coast, where they have some more advantages in terms of the mix of labor costs and regulatory approvals being much more rapid and efficient. Or they can even go further abroad into South America and Asia and so forth. And so, at the risk of somewhat stretching it, any of these proponents can take their business wherever they want. Canada is not the only jurisdiction which can have these jobs, landed. And so our concern is that we have to find a balancing point. We have to make sure that we have a good system of regulatory passage, that we have a good system where workers' rights and remuneration are honored, but at the same time that we do this in a way that attracts investment, so that the end result is that Canada wins. And these proponents decide to do work here because the overall mix, all those different ingredients in the mix, are positive for them.
Okay, thanks for joining us.
What I'd like to start with, Bea, is that these clean energy tax credit, you came out fully in support when it was introduced in March. Maybe you could kind of give the CLC position on the clean energy tax credit, and we can start from there.
Well, we really very strongly believe that the clean energy tax credit is a very important part of Canada's transition to a low carbon economy. We really believe that there needs to be some strings attached so that we can create the right kind of jobs in the communities that workers are going to be relying on as we transition.
And at first glance, it looks like, but I don't think it is. It's we have community benefits out here, and there's other provinces that have it as well, and out here in Vancouver or in BC, which say that you have to join a union to work. This is not that. I want to stress that, and maybe you could explain it's what these wage not incentives, but requirements, I guess, are in the tax credits.
Right, this is not that, but it does require for the payment of prevailing wages. And of course, that can be the bucket of benefits, so to speak, not just wages, but of course, benefits and everything that can be considered for that employee, but also making sure that there's a certain amount of hours that has to be provided by registered apprentices as well as equity serving groups. And we think that those things are very key to creating the kinds of opportunities for workers right across this country to actually move into these jobs and to retain these jobs.
And the argument on the non-union side is that this will sort of not freeze out, but like put a pause on investment, especially since America is investing, I don't know, about probably close to $1 trillion in infrastructure. So there's lots of projects down there as well. Do you think that's a valid argument, or do you think, or not?
I don't think that's a valid argument. I mean, realistically, we are competing with the IRA in the States, right? And so we need to also be concerning ourselves with the kinds of positions and jobs that we want to create in Canada. At the end of the day, I don't think that paying prevailing wages and meeting those requirements are that arduous that it's going to scare investments away. There's many opportunities right across this country, and we're looking forward to working with companies and employers that want to actually create the jobs that we need.
Now, conversely, I would think, and I could be wrong about this, that the clean energy focus would be on places like Alberta, traditionally not the most union-friendly place in the world. So do you think that those companies will be a little scared off by these tax credits, or do you think they'll embrace them because they know that this is up to their benefit?
I really think that it's to their benefit, and hopefully they will see that as well, because, to create the kind of communities that we want, and to be able to meet the workers' needs. And workers are nervous, obviously, about this transition. Workers are worried. What all workers want across Canada, whether they're in Alberta or in any other place across Canada, is to know that they have a decent job with good pay, with family-sustaining pay, with good benefits, and that they're able to come home safe from their job every single day. And really, these clean energy tax credits really speak to enforcing that, right? And to making sure that the jobs that we will be pivoting to and or enshrining will continue to be those good paying and hopefully unionized jobs right across the country.
And just in terms of where you're at, it's not law yet, is it? I don't think it's and so what's the CLC's role in sort of making sure this becomes law to the point to the ability that you can, I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, certainly finance drafted this legislation in August, right? And we've had some opportunity to provide feedback, and we'll be working with the federal government and with various parties to provide our thoughts on this particular issue, and lobbying, of course, on all of these different points to make sure that this law goes through. We do think that we as a society have to decide what kind of jobs we want, and in order to make sure that we have those good family and community sustaining jobs, there are certain strings attached that we need to have. There's no value in our government spending public money if it doesn't go to the public good. And so, we need to make sure that there are very key points that need to be met here, so that workers can be safe knowing that they have a job tomorrow and that it's going to be a good job.
Okay, and you've also come out in support of a lot of different clean energy initiatives. Maybe you could talk about that, how these the union movement and clean energy sort of tie together in a way, or at least why you support it.
Well, clean energy, it's critically important that we pivot, obviously. We've seen the extremes that we've had all summer long with so many forest fires, so many workers actually being displaced from their home communities for long stretches of time. And so we absolutely see the need for this transition, right? And it's very challenging when many workers are relying on some of the jobs that we know will need to transition. So we, as the labor movement, understand that we need to speak with members, that we need to speak with workers that are being impacted, that we need to ensure that there is comprehension and understanding of the need, but also that workers' voices are at every table where these conversations are happening, and that there's worker input at the discussion tables to determine how future funding will be spent, right? What kind of jobs are going to be created and where they will be created, to meet with employers and with government to actually identify opportunities and to make sure that workers' needs and the community's needs are being met.
And I asked this of Paul De Jong, so I'll ask the same of you. I asked him sort of what his community and what stakeholders in his side of things, what they think about this clean energy tax credit. What's your sort of take on the temperature in the sort of the circles that you're in of labor and of also of industry too, as I'm sure you deal with a lot of industry people as well?
We see the clean energy tax credit as a bonus, as an absolute important need to this transition, because without this clean energy tax credit, the jobs that will be created will not be the same caliber of what we actually need. And so it shouldn't be just to maximize profit. It should also be to make sure that we have the jobs that we need in the communities that need them, and for workers to actually be able to flourish and stay within their home communities.
Okay, Bea, thanks for joining us today.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much.
And that's it for this episode of the Construction Record Podcast. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Music, or Amazon Music, and on the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks for listening.